Okay, well, I guess we're ready to get started. Is that right, Matt? Or
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here. We appreciate your participation and enthusiasm about Drupal. So, with that, Gloria, thank you so much for putting this together. This is Gloria's first presentation, and we're really excited to have her here. So, thank you,
yes,
Gloria.
yes, thank you. So yeah, as you know, we're going to talk about creating and using Drupal plugins. This does mention static, but really we're just going to go over annotation and Yaml plugins because those are the most common types that Drupal uses. So with that being said. My development history is that I started out as a college student at Chattanooga State, and I met my mentor there who introduced me to Drupal. Um, and then after I interned for 2 years as a front-end developer, I discovered that I really had a passion for web development and not just computer programming. And then after a couple years of both front-end and back-end work, I transitioned almost completely to back-end programming. So the sites I've worked on that I'm most proud of are the Department of Interior, um, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Office of Justice Programs, which is the most recent that I've done, and that's under DOJ. So I was really happy about that one. So with that being said, I want to acknowledge the people that have helped me along the way. This is my mentor, my first mentor, who graciously gave me a computer, a Mac computer to borrow, and he taught me how to use Drupal. Sort of just sat me in front of a computer and was like, "Hey, here you go. If you need help, I'm in the next room in my office." And then after a while of going to Drupal conferences, I met Chris Mcgrath, which I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know. And he's the esteemed boss here. And he gave me my first job um, on DrupalContractors.com. So he essentially gave me a chance as well to prove myself. So yeah, I'm really thankful for them too for mentoring me. And then Matthew really helped me put this together. He was really adamant about getting this done on time because I've had a lot of I guess hiccups with being busy and stuff. So he really helped me get this together. So with that being said, this is our agenda. So what are plugins in Drupal, why use them, how they're discovered, and then of course I'm going to go over annotation-based and YAML-based plugins, as well as plugin derivatives, using plugins that have been defined, and then real-world examples that are in Drupal core. So what are they? Plugins are small pieces of functionality that you can reuse, and you can swap them out. And this is like what the person said about the blocks in Drupal 8. You can have multiple instances of them and put them in multiple places if you want to, which is cool. And if you are used to Drupal 7, then these replace info hooks. So excuse me. That means that instead of defining it in a hook function, you define it in a couple classes. So I think that's pretty cool and important to relate, to the Drupal 7 people. So why use them? So object oriented, it's clean design. It uses interfaces and namespaces to find them, and they're configurable. So you can define your own ones that are simple or complex with configuration, and then you can alter them, any way you want to. They're reusable if needed. They're loaded cleanly through a plugin manager service, so that's nice. And then they're fast, so they're cached by Drupal's caching system. So these are the three different plugin discovery methods that Drupal uses. So a couple examples of annotation plugins are blocks and field types. And then for YAML, that's routing and libraries even are plugins. So creating an annotation-based plugin. So you create a class that has this namespace, so source/annotation, and you place it up under there. And I'll show you guys at the end of this, close to the end of this presentation, how this is defined, but you'll see something about this soon. So you'll create that, and then you'll create the plugin manager. And then that class is defined as a service in your module name.services.yaml file. And it often extends the default plugin manager, which does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And then you'll create the plugin class, which is actually up under your plugin's name that you define up under here. So like source annotation, some name here. You create to actually make a definition of that plugin. You put source plugin, whatever is here, and then the plugin goes up under that. But again, I'll show you guys this in a second. All right, so this is the annotation. This is the annotation class that you define, which is up under the namespace annotation. And really what you need to do is make sure it extends the plugin class, and then have this @ annotation right here, because that's really important for Drupal to recognize it. And then, you just define all the variables that you want for your plugin. Okay, so this is the plugin manager that I've created, and it extends the default plugin manager class. And then what this does right here is it tells you, hey, go look for plugins up under this namespace. So plugin and then theme component. And you just pass in all of this stuff. I had to break this online so that you guys could see it. You'll pass in an interface right here. And this is the interface that all of your plugins implement. So as long as they implement this interface, it'll find them as well. And then this tells it where the annotation can be found, which is that class that you guys saw earlier in the previous slide. These right here, these are actually alter hooks. So you can, like in other modules, for instance, you can call this hook, and someone can, alter your plugin using that hook. And then this sets the cache backend, of course, so that you can get cached plugin definitions rather than having to pull them, like calculate them and stuff all the time. Okay, so this is, of course, this is going to scroll. So this is like a plugin definition. So this is the plugin class itself. It's under, and I don't have the namespace on here. That's all right. But anyway, it's up under source plugin theme component in your module, since this is theme component. And then this class name is button. So it's source plugin theme component button. And this right here is this is the plugin. This is using the variables that you saw from that annotation class back there. So you define your own, ID, label, attributes, and element, and those were all defined in that annotation that you saw. Again, this right here is really important. I don't know if you guys have worked with blocks, but it's important to have the annotation there. And then it extends this theme component base class, which implements the theme component interface that you saw in the plugin manager constructor. So I'm going to go to the next slide. All right, and then now I'm going to go over a YAML-based plugin and how they're defined. All right, so this is a class that, or not class, a YAML file that's named specifically where you can discover it, and I'll show you the discovery here in a second. But essentially, you want to make sure that you got your module name, your plugin name that you'll see here in a minute, and then the YAML extension. And Drupal reads these as the IDs, the keys. So that's your ID for this instance. And then label, element, attributes, all that was defined before, but this is a different discovery method. So it has a new plugin manager class just for, and this may be too small, but hopefully I can explain this and you guys can understand. So this again extends the default manager class, but the difference here, since the default plugin manager uses annotation discovery as its main source of discovery, you don't want to use the constructor because it uses like the parent constructor, I mean, because it uses largely annotation stuff, so you don't even have to call it. And here's the back end as well, the cache back end and the cache key and stuff. And this right here, I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but this is how it finds that YAML file. So like module name dot theme underscore component dot YAML is how this is found. And that's found using the YAML discovery class. And I meant to put this slide in here, but I honestly forgot about it, and it's about plugin decorators. And there's actually a YAML discovery decorator class, and what you can do is you can wrap that around an annotation, and you can use them both ways. So like if you wanted to stick them all in one class for, like this example, they could all go in the same class using that decorator. And what a decorator essentially is it wraps around another discovery method just so that it can add some extra like modifications or configuration, depending on how you define it. So I think that's pretty cool. All right, so this is how you define the plugin manager service. That's module name services.services.yaml. And the convention here is to name it this way. So like plugin dot manager dot whatever plugin you want here. So that's how you make sure that Drupal can see it and you can call on it. All right, so creating a plugin derivative, and then I'm going to show you how to use both of these on both plugin discovery methods. So this right here is a plugin derivative. It is at the namespace plugin / derivative up here, as you can see. And all of them extend something called deriver base because it provides a lot of functionality for you. And essentially what I'm doing here is just defining. This is like really static. It's not getting the data from anywhere. Of course, you could think of a number of ways to get a list here for your derivatives. And just going through and adding it to a variable called this derivatives. And that, that saves it to that variable. So how to use them. Okay, so all you have to do to use that is just put a deriver key in your plugin definition. So like up under, however many variables you have, you just put deriver equals, and then you just put the full class namespace right there, and it will derive it for you. And then pretty much the same thing goes with YAML plugins. You just have to add a deriver key, and Drupal does all of that, which is pretty nice. Okay, so this is like where the demo part that I was wanting to get to. So we're going to go over routes, which are YAML plugins that allow paths to be defined in your module .routing file. And then we're going to go over blocks as well, which are annotation plugins with reusable chunks of content in our configuration, like I said before. And then fields, which are actually a collection of plugins, or plugin types, I should say, that consist of, field type, field widget, and field formatter annotation plugins. So, okay, so YAML plugins defined in, module.routing.yaml used to create all paths in Drupal. So over here I have the routes pulled up for, this is the block module. It's the block.routing.yaml. And I'm looking for a path real quick so that, oh yeah, right here. Okay, so so all of these are plugins, right? These are defined somewhere in Drupal to tell it, hey, this is a plugin. Come find me, right? So this right here, I'm not sure if you guys know, is the this is where you add blocks at. So for this demo, I'm going to go ahead and get off that. Okay, so that is right here. Okay, so that's it defines the path. It says, hey, look at this controller, and then that controller's right here. Which, if you look into it, you'll see that it actually gets the list builder from a configuration entity called block. So all right, so going to add a block just to show for reference. Just another page title, why not? Okay, so this right, oh wait, no, that's not a good example. Sorry. Trying to figure out one that has some configuration on it. Okay, yeah, that's okay. So this form right here is actually an entity form from this class right here. This is a class that is a configuration entity type, and again, this is a plugin that is a configuration entity type, and it actually stores plugin settings on it. So that's how they get into configuration. So like when you do a configuration export, it actually saves the plugin instance settings per configuration entity type. So with that being said, I'm going to go to show you where all of this gets defined at, because I think that's important. Whenever I first learned about plugins, they were really like everywhere and nowhere for me because I didn't understand how everything was happening. So what this does is it adds to its settings the plugin form. So it's like entity get plugin, and you don't have to worry about all of this. But it builds out the configuration form for the plugin. So it adds that configuration form on top of the entity form, which I think is really cool. And then I'm going to go down to that method to show you what it's doing exactly. All right, so this is how you use a plugin. So you get your, and this right here is, you can think of this as the plugin manager service that you saw defined. So like, plugin.manager.theme component was our example. This is plugin.manager.block. And this is how you get that class, that plugin class, like you get an instance of it. And you have to use the ID that you defined. So like in our example, it was button, right? You have to use, button here or something that's already defined. Otherwise, this will throw an exception. But that's actually how you get the class. So yeah, that's how you create them and use them, so that you can get all the methods that's associated uh, with your plugin class. This does not show. Okay. You can also do something without having to instantiate anything. So this right here, this method right here, get definitions, that will be available to you in your plugin class if you extend the default plugin manager. And essentially what that does is just gets you the different arrays. So like all of the plugins that you've defined, it gets them as you see them. If they're a YAML plugin, I guess. If they're not a YAML plugin, it just gets you that, it just gets you this stuff right here for an annotation plugin. So it just gives you, like, in this instance, an ID and, the admin label, right? So it doesn't get you this actual class, but it gets you the definition. So you don't always have to instantiate it if you don't need to. And those definitions that you saw are cached, which is nice. See, so yeah, cache definitions. Okay, and so this was the example that I wanted to provide, and you guys just saw it. It's the example that I wanted to provide for blocks and how they're used. So like this is the powered by Drupal block, and then you can see the awesome power of it over here. It's already on this one because it's the default. And each block has this build method, and that's one of the biggest things I think is great about especially annotation plugins, because you can define your own methods and do all kinds of crazy stuff to swappable pieces of functionality that you need, for your site. So that was blocks. Okay, so these are a collection of plugins that have to work together. And I don't think there's actually a plugin name field, but I do know that there's 3 of these that have to be used together. So this is a field type annotation plugin, and you can see it has all those, the keys that it's defined in its class, in its annotation class. And what's cool about this is that it builds on top of other annotation plugins. So the default widget is the field widget, and then the default formatter is the default is the field formatter, excuse me. So and then it has its own methods. It defines a database schema and all that, and storage settings form, all that stuff. So it has a few very useful methods. And then this is the field widget plugin. It just, all you have to do is define the field type for it, and you can actually define more than one, as you can see here. And it has, some useful methods as well. And then this is a field formatter plugin, and you can also define more than one field type for it, which is nice. And then it has this view elements, which is actually how you see elements or see a field in Drupal. It'll call this method and say, hey, this is how I want it to be seen. And that's all I have for this. I didn't think it would be this quick, to be honest. Are there any questions? Like, do you guys want me to go over something that I showed you, or because there's plenty of time?
What are some of your favorite use case examples? You mentioned like blocks were everywhere and in your mind now. What are you liking to use it for?
Other than blocks, or like, what do you mean?
Like when you're looking at a site rollout, what are you thinking plugin from the get-go? Just the block layout structure or anything else?
I actually think of everything in everything in plugins now, because there's so many. Like your module name .routing file, your module name .services file, your module name .libraries file, you know, .yaml at the end for those. And then the main thing that I think of though that is the most, like, I guess, prominent is blocks, because you know you define them in a class and all of that. But again, there's just so many, I guess. So I think of field that you need with its own data and all that. But as far as like, so is that what you mean by your question, or?
Yeah, it was just whatever that really speaks to you. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, so are there any more questions?
It's all new to me, so I don't know what I don't know to ask. So it's pretty cool though.
Well, feel free to ask anything. I like really looked into it, and I mean, I've had many hours like looking into this stuff. So
there was really small print on the screen when you were talking about how the YAML discovery works, and I wasn't. It felt a little bit quick for me, so I'd like to see that a little bigger, maybe.
Okay, I'm actually gonna pull this up on this side because I do have this in code. It'll probably be better that way. I had to use images that weren't necessarily the best dimensions. Okay, now that one's the annotation one. Okay, so if I can do that. So so that line right there makes it all of a sudden YAML. You just like, okay, so for this, you actually have to override this method. I didn't bring that up before. So you do have to override this method if you're using anything other than an annotation discovery. And something that I think is really cool, and I would love to show you guys with, because I didn't get to before. Before I go though, does this like, do you understand this now, or do you need me to like elaborate more on how this works, or?
Sorry, I'm typing notes.
But
like,
I would like to hear
you have to implement the get discovery method of the interface no matter what type of plugin it is. But if it's not an annotation plugin, you need to override the discovery method. Like when here, it's YAML discovery instead of annotation discovery.
Right, and I can actually show you a side-by-side comparison of these. So this is all you need. This is all you need on this left, or on this right side right here. That's all you need if you want an annotation. If you want an annotation plugin, you just have to like essentially say, this is my subdirectory, this is my plugin interface, this is the annotation name. And I also highly recommend, if you guys have never used it before, to use Drupal Console for this stuff, because it's lovely. It generates a lot of code for you, and you can just go in and look around and see what it's doing. But yeah, so you don't have to override anything if you're just, you know, going to do it this way. You do call the parent constructor here. Here you do not, because you're not using any of this stuff, which the default plugin manager is set up for, but doesn't necessarily have to use.
So I'm a kindergartner. Give me this from a 30,000 foot view. Like, what does this problem solve? Like using plugins for theming altogether? Is this for like prototyping a theme quickly, or?
Okay, so the example I used was like, you know, a little bit more out there than, you know, you would normally see this. So it's not just like prototyping a theme. It's essentially architecting any kind of functionality that you need to do somewhat of the same thing, but you know, you might want to alter certain things, like, and that's why I use this example. But you could do that with, you know, anything you can think of that needs to be, you know, reused over and over again, but maybe in a different way sometimes.
Gotcha.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It just, I'm right in the middle of doing, creating components in Pattern Labs on a project, and I was interested in this for like the reusability of it, because I know that somewhere down the line we're probably almost everything the same, but a one-off on some very simple level. And I mean, I'll have to dig in and read up some more on it, but this is very interesting to me.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually just used that because I was being a little bit imaginative, you know, and thinking about, oh, what if we didn't have to use stuff like Pattern Lab, you know, but you know, that might be far-fetched, right? I was just,
that's kind of new to me as well. I mean, the last time I used Pattern Lab was like 4 years ago, and now I'm like making it work on a Drupal 9 theme, and it's I'm not struggling. I mean, I'm getting it, but this seems to be more I don't know, comprehensive, I guess.
okay.
What I'm trying to do, I'm trying to create components and then reuse those components in the actual theme, but they're components in the Pattern Lab, but they're also going to be used in the theme. And I'm like trying to figure out how do I reuse those in the theme? Do I have to like copy paste it and then
Right.
put it in the right folder? But this seems like it's more module driven, so it's not.
Yeah, and you can actually do this in your theme too, by the way. So I'll go ahead and show you that as well, because I guess I didn't point that out before. Again, sorry, I meant to, but I forgot to go over a few things, if I'm being honest.
No, that's cool. That would have been my next question.
Okay, so
you have to track it in a module, or can you do this within the theme?
right. So a lot of the times you'll just see the module handler defined. But I added the theme handler up here, and then I passed it through.
That's cool.
I passed it through right here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like so small. Sorry. Okay, so with that being said, essentially what you do is like after you override the discovery, you get a chance to override the directories too. So I passed in all the themed directories as well.
Okay.
And then you can define it, you know, theme component, and then not sure if I can make that bigger, probably not. You can do this in your theme too if you define it that way. So of course this one you can't, because it's the annotation one I just created too. But yeah, just you add that by using the theme handler, and then, you know, essentially merging the directories.
It's just more cohesive than what I'm trying to do right now. Like I've got very generic twig based patterns, but like I don't know that they even acknowledge fields because they're in the Pattern Labs directory, and then I'm having to like adapt them to use in the actual theme. So this just seems more like the Drupal model, what you're doing here, even though it's something I'd have to completely learn from scratch, but it seems better.
So yeah, I just want to go over this real quick because I'm like showing you guys this. If you don't know already, you can actually define defaults. So like if, for instance, you call on this plugin and it doesn't have like a label, which it always has to have an ID, but if it doesn't have a label or attributes or element or you know, whatever the variable is, you can define a default for it. So like whenever you create that instance, if it does not have that value on that, it will use the value over here. So that's pretty cool.
Interesting.
Are there any more questions?
I don't have any.
Okay.
I was going to mention, in my experience working with plugins, a lot of the time, you're writing a plugin is often very simple because it defines the plugin manager. So like if you're writing a block or a field or a migration, it does become very simple to just kind of change the logic by copying and pasting an existing plugin or fiddling around in the YAML file. What I do find is that actually defining a plugin manager is an order of magnitude more complicated, because now you're thinking about the logic you need to solve your problem, but also how to create a system that is flexible and extensible so that other logic can kind of come into play.
Right. So are you saying it's like really abstract in a lot of ways, or?
Yeah, plugins do abstract the complexity because when you're writing the plugin file yourself, you're basically told what functions to write, and the dependencies that handle the features of that plugin are already loaded for you by like the plugin base or the plugin manager. The goal of plugins is to simplify the task for the developer by narrowing their focus down to the logic that they're trying to implement without worrying about the complexity of the system. Like you mentioned, it handles caching and all kinds of stuff on the back end. But then what I'm pointing out, though, is that the level of effort difference between simply writing a plugin file itself versus like writing the plugin system or the plugin manager that defines a new type of.
So I do want to show you guys this example that I have. This is like something that I was just trying to put together to show you like how derivatives and stuff work. So this is a block, as you can see, but it uses the theme components that you saw earlier. So of course, all of that. And then I am calling the theme component manager here so that I can use it. And then dependency injection, all that good stuff. So for those of you that don't know, there's this is already defined for blocks. Like you use this block form, and it adds it to that configuration form on the admin structure block page. So this right here. So the title, the content, the theme component, and those are just appearing in different order because this one has a weight for some reason and that one doesn't. And so what I did here was I was like, okay, maybe I can make this a little bit more custom. So scrolling on down this way, that, to make sure it sticks to configuration. All right, so this is the build method. So I'm going to save this. And it will change the content for that. So I'm going to make that more obvious text because those are all similar. All right, so yeah, it did that. And the reason it did that is because I set it up over here to, so here's that create instance again, right? That gives me that class that implements this interface because I told it to in the annotation plugin manager. And then this gets the configuration from that block form you saw up above. And if it doesn't exist, then it'll just get the regular content. And then this checks if it's empty or not. And I actually, this is really confusing because I use the same method thing that that blocks do, but I'm going to show you what this does exactly. So this is my base class, and I just defined it in my base class because that was sufficient. It gets the plugin definition. So like what you want to do is for all of your plugins, you want to extend something called plugin base. It gives you all kinds of methods, and this variable, this array variable right here is really important to get the keys or the values. Oh yeah, sorry, I keep forgetting that it doesn't stick to the big text.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, no problem. So yeah, plugin base, you want to make sure it extends that, and implement. And I've just decided that in the interface, these are the 3 methods, and this method is one that blocks implement. So it's a little bit confusing, but as you can see, it gets called over here and it adds it to the blocks render array. So that's how that gets called. And these are derived off of that derivative I showed you earlier. So, so yeah, it, you know, I just defined it there and then added it as a block. It gives you, instead of it just showing up as button, like whenever you're trying to get the definitions, whenever you add a derivative, it removes the base definition like this, and it makes it to where only the derivatives show up. So you know, like your, in this instance, button primary, secondary, danger, all of that. So yeah, that's how that works over here. Any questions?
Cool.
Okay, well, I guess that is it then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Really
Thank you.
well.
We appreciate everybody coming. Just want to make sure that everybody knows that Matthew's always looking for people to present and blog, and we pay for the blogs. Actually, this stuff we hope is just sort of mutually fun and awesome to enrich the community, and also give folks like Gloria a chance to try out this kind of talk in a little more of a, you know, friendly setting than getting up on stage or, you know, at a feature event. So anybody else that's up for that, Matthew, as Gloria said, really helps out a lot with preparing the presentations. You know, we try to help you guys brainstorm as to what might be valuable to the community. Doesn't have to be on Drupal. You know, we've already had some on sort of mindfulness in the workplace, and everybody here and everybody that contributed as well, Andrew and Josh, appreciate you guys. Matt, of course, over, and thanks again. Look forward to seeing you guys around and on Slack. Till the next time.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for the education.
Oh yes, no problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great job, Gloria.
Thanks.
Okay, great
Bye
job.
everyone.
Good job.
Yep.